a.m. on New Era TT Radio, Net Radio.
Bring you bold discussions, the hottest topics, and some tracks to keep you moving. The Drivetime Exchange on Net Radio, taking you above and beyond.
One with your fitness in the right body. One with your fitness in the right track. Me thought was a friend, and we like it like that. Coming on my life like snaking out the grass. One with your fitness in the right body.
Well, I don't have time to beef. Lucky for you, my friend. I in a good spirit. I drink in a good spirits. The vibes right up to the limits. So don't hold me down, don't fight me down. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good spirit. I drink in a good spirits. The vibes ain't cars in a minute. So don't hold me down, don't fight me down. Yeah, yeah, yeah. My friend and them couldn't tell you about me. Good people, it's good people. We only want love and we so good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. My family couldn't tell you about me. Good people, it's good people. We only on love. Well, every man make their choices. I say we make sacrifices. We block out the noises. We have to forget the voices. One day we gon' make it. We don't have to fake it. I give you my best. I give you the chain off my neck. I give you my love and respect. But now hear the story. Is you vex with me? Like I do you something. Like I do you something. When I hear the show now, is you vex with me? Like I do the wrong thing. Like I do you something. Oh, it's a good thing. I in a good spirit. I drink in a good spirits. The vibes right up to the limits. So don't hold me down, don't fight me down. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good
All right, everybody, and of course, so welcome to it. Welcome to your Drive Time Exchange right here on New Era TT Radio. And of course, bringing you a good spirit inside of this Drive Time is none other than our host, Mr. Tony Fraser. Tony, good afternoon to you. How are you doing?
I am good, Sir Charles. How are you?
Excellent.
All right. After the weekend,
In spite of the weekend, as you see.
yeah. The last week has been a rough one and a happy one. You know, there are those who are crying and those who are smiling.
Expected, yes.
Yeah, I know you, Charlo. You're smiling, whatever happens.
Regardless of where it goes, I always smile.
You still have to live your life, right?
Yeah, and that is it. I have to live on this planet, you know.
Yes. So we're gonna do something a little bit different this afternoon. I thought I would invite one of my good friends, who has many other friends and associates, to come talk this afternoon. You know, the election has just finished. I have a fan blowing on me. I have to get rid of it. Yeah, elections have just finished, and we are not too sure. The EBC does not drill down into people's ages who are voting and so on. So we have no real idea as to whether young people have been voting in quantities or not. But nevertheless, some of the young people I know feel that is not their business. They don't have a role inside there. Not sufficient room has been created for them. And if they attempt to intervene, all kinds of things. But you're not going to listen to me. You're going to listen to them this afternoon. So I asked my good friend Rudy Hamagi, who is no stranger to political and living issues. He's always challenging something here, there, and everywhere. Rudy, thank you for coming this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tony, and thank you for having us and sharing a bit of the youth perspective, although I always joke that I'm sort of on the latter side of youth these days. But nevertheless, glad to be here.
Good enough to be here. And you've brought some colleagues with you, and they have some challenging names, but let me attempt some of them. I see a young lady there, and Anarion. Does that come close to how you pronounce your name?
No, it doesn't. It's Anarion.
Okay, so I
and thank you for having me here.
Anarion Mason, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Or I hear some people say Mason, but Mason, the typical kind of spelling. Thank you for coming here. We have Priyanna Oudit. Where's Priyanna?
Priyanna is here.
Okay, did I say that one correctly, Priyanna?
You said it correctly. Congratulations on that one.
Right.
One out of three. One out of three.
And then there is one other, Andy. I am not going to try Andy's last name. I want to hear it from him first, and then I will repeat after him. Andy.
Tony, he hasn't joined yet, but it's
Oh, he hasn't
Berahazar.
joined it. Okay.
It's Berahazar.
Great. So in the meantime, I will try to get acquainted with it. Let me ask you folks, and let me ask Rudy to start off. What was the feeling about participating in this general election that was last week, Monday? 7 days have gone by.
Already,
time
yeah.
goes by quickly. We were anticipating it for some time, and now it has come and gone in a flash. What is said? 5-second democracy. You stick your
Yes.
finger in the red ink, and that's the end of you for the rest of 5 years. What is the general view of the young people that you've associated with, come across, interacted with? And I'm going to ask the same question of all the three persons, the other two persons who are here this afternoon.
Well, thank you again for that question and for really joining in this exploration of what's going on, Tony, in terms of participatory democracy at the millennial level and below. So that would be persons in their mid-40s and younger. When we started the organization, ourPARTT, the portal for accountability and representation for Trinidad and Tobago.
Sorry, Rudy, let me give
Yes.
you 30 seconds. I should have done that at the start.
Sure.
To tell our listeners, our viewers about the association before you go into the details of.
Certainly, my pleasure. So again, ourPARTT, the portal for accountability and representation for Trinidad and Tobago, as the name suggests, is meant to really mobilize citizens across different sectors and segments to do their part. Our tagline is, if I do my part and you do your part, then together we do our part to build a better Trinidad and Tobago. And the organization is a civil society NGO that focuses on 6 key projects. I'll just give you one as an example. It's called the Pansu Collective. It's named after the Panchayat Susu models that our ancestors used for economic and social empowerment. And that is a center of excellence for civil society where we bring the private sector and technocrats together with financiers and CBOs and NGOs so that we can make civil society stronger. Because if you can solve the problems that these NGOs deal with, not just treat with symptoms, then we can transfer their resources and their talent into other areas. But in the lead up to the general elections, we actually launched a project entitled RepTT, and Anarion could also speak a little bit more to that afterwards. But in a nutshell, RepTT, again, with a youth focus, a lot of young people use that terminology. I'm repping for my favorite band, I'm repping for my favorite sports team, etc. The idea was to engage specifically using social media these 3 generations of people. So the millennials, the Z generation who are of voting age, and some of the alphas that are going to be of voting age in short order. And by engaging with them, we were able to extrapolate some data to answer your question directly. And the data proved that unfortunately, the majority of these citizens were the most apathetic when it came to the elections. Over the years, they have developed a sense of detachment from politics. Because when we use politics, Tony, in ourPARTT, we mean it in its truest original sense, which is the business of the people. But when the average person says politics, they of course talk about party politics. And because the 40-year-olds and younger have really experienced a degenerated party politics ecosystem for the last 30 years, they believe that casting a vote in this system is not worth their time. Unfortunately, most of them, Tony, actually want to leave our shores. So there's a disconnection. There is a very loose tension with their birthplace and the dreams that they have for themselves. So many of them would rather go elsewhere and invest there and maybe participate in those elections. They follow like the United States and European elections more than the local elections. So in a nutshell, just to open the innings, that is what we found, unfortunately. And we've committed to continuing work now to try and change that as we move forward.
Right. So let me ask your two other colleagues as to why that is so. If they can testify to that being the case in their instances, why is that? Go ahead.
Okay, I could take it away from here. I think along Rudolph's sentiments, yes, there has been a huge gap in, and I'm speaking as a 29-year-old who studied in Trinidad, and even one who stayed right out of high school, going into university, now working in Trinidad. Generally, there is a sentiment of nonchalance. There is a sentiment of, well, what I say wouldn't matter. And to be honest, I don't think that then there's been any real need for young people to really step up and step into a platform or to step into a space where their voices are heard. It was only recently when I decided to make the proactive effort of finding myself in spaces where young people's voices can be heard, thanks to Rudolph and Anarion, that's been the case here. Was I able to realize, okay, I could encourage discussion, I could encourage curiosity, I could encourage just listening to what they have to say, because again, it comes back down to feeling unheard, feeling left in the shadows. And then I think it's also growing up, seeing what party politics was like was very distasteful to me. And I believe that between race politics, the mudslinging, the corruption, all of those things could just leave a nasty taste in someone's mouth then. And I think that those, yes. But
Priyanna, let me ask you, why not attempt to break into the nasty politics, quote unquote, and attempt change from within? You know, sometimes throwing stones from outside, that's not as, it doesn't achieve as much as getting into. Hopefully it doesn't corrupt you or drag you into that hole, but attempting a change from within.
You have to be allowed to be within in order to attempt that change. And so, I mean, yes, there is the thought to get involved further. Are there resources for young people to get involved? I'm sure that there is. There's not been any opening, particularly for me immediately. However, if that is the case, of course, I wouldn't stand on the outside and throw stones. It always makes sense to try to make the change from within. So agreed 100%. If there is possibility for that for young people, for me in particular, I would be glad for that. And I think that this is one of those possibilities in speaking about it, spreading awareness, spreading my message, and then of course being challenged and so forth.
Andy, as we are talking about young people and power and politics, my mind goes back to 1970. I don't hear a long time, right? As a young fella in 1970. And there was a man called Michael Alls. I don't know if you heard of him, but he became a trade union leader.
Yes.
And he started a group in San Fernando called Young Power. And it didn't become a big political party. It morphed into a political party over a period of time. What was the name of it? I'll remember it in a moment. But it's one instance of a group of young people. He became a senior trade union leader of
Yes.
the workers. I'll remember it.
Wasn't it Bigu at one time, Tony?
Yeah, it was Bigu, but before Bigu, it was something else. But you're right. It ended up being Bigu. And he was the president of it, and then he took off to Togo and became a farmer, etc., etc. The important point was that he and some of his colleagues in San Fernando, as part of the whole movement of the National Joint Action Committee, became involved in the politics, as it were. So let me ask Andy, your comment on what has gone on so far.
I don't think it's Andy you're referring to. I think it's me, right?
Okay, but
Because
sorry.
Andy isn't here until 5 p.m.
Okay, pronounce your name for me, please.
You
I'm
can
getting a
use
lesson in pronunciation of
you can
names this
use
afternoon.
Mason because it's what I'm referred to in my current profession. Because a lot of
Okay,
people tend to butcher my name, but
okay.
it's pronounced Anarion.
Anarion,
Interesting. Yes.
Anarion, you said?
Yes, Anarion.
Okay, but I will stick with Mason. See, I don't
Yes,
want to
thank you.
I don't
Let
want
me
to butcher your name. Yes,
Interesting.
Mason, you've heard your colleagues. What is your piece on young people involvement in politics, or non-involvement, if you like?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say again, thank you for having me here. And just to piggyback a little bit on what Priyanna was saying, for involvement, our part was created exactly for that, where we empower young people and we train them in such a way that they can eventually take leadership roles in the country. My thoughts on this elections and young people is more or less along the same line of my colleagues. It's very apathetic to the point that a lot of people young persons didn't want to go and vote because they are of the perception that my one vote don't count. No matter what, I live in a UNC stronghold or a PNM stronghold, third party is not going to make a difference, and things like that. And I have friends who went out, they actually went out and voted. And when I asked, what made you decide to go and vote this time around as opposed to the other times that you had the opportunity, they're just naturally fed up with things in the country the way it was, and they wanted to entice change. Give that exercise their civic right in making a change. And I think that came from one of our projects under the RepTT brand, which is the election toolkit. We did some myths versus facts where we taught young people and first time voters, if you don't make a vote, if you don't go and dip your finger in that ink, somebody else make the decision for you. So people were about that aspect, okay, I can make a decision for myself. And that is what I saw from my end with my colleagues and persons around my age, why they actually went out and vote this time around.
I want to drop in here and speak about the relevance of social media because it impacted me this election time. The relevance of social media and how that can impact your perception. So I am an avid social media person. I'm there every day, multiple hours for the day. And I think that there were some pretty good educational tools aside from ourPARTT, which you all had some posts about and tools that people could have used. And then there were younger persons actually. There was one particular video I saw with a young gentleman sitting in front of the camera and speaking about the history of elections and the history of voting and the fact that the rights and the privilege that we all have to vote now did not just come in one day or in 1 year. And he spoke about the history of when only 6% of our population was able to vote. And the time frame between that and now, we all have the privilege. And he used the word privilege, and I think that that's something that needs to be stressed. We have the privilege to vote and even not to vote. And I think, as with any other privilege that any person of any socioeconomic class or whatever can use, you try to, as much as possible, use your privileges for the greater good or for performing your duty. And I felt like that was impactful to me and potentially other young persons. There were a lot of reposts of this one video, just talking about that history and talking about the privilege we have now. And I felt moved by that video, and I shared it with hundreds of persons as well.
Yeah, and you're right, and whoever the person is, very right. One of the things that we should be doing, and especially in groups like yours, and I'm not trying to determine your agenda for you, but the voting, the franchise did not come easily to our ancestors.
Yes.
It came through a whole lot of struggle and deprivation. There was a story in the newspaper recently about the taking away the civil rights of the citizens of Port of Spain at the turn into the 20th century, and on top of that, charging them some heavy water rates. The result was that they burned down the Red House.
Yes.
So it did not come easy. And I'm not advocating that anybody burn down the Red House now, but I'm just depicting, and of course, into the century, the whole TMA, the labor movement started. The reaction to colonial rule, and right down to Priyanna at the end of 1920, and so on, and the whole history coming up there. It's available for people to read it and get an appreciation of what it's all about.
But Tony, I think, sorry, you really hit a nail on its head there. Obviously, we have something in common because someone special to you went to a prestige school that I went to. And,
went to a good school.
At Queen's Royal College, I can say categorically that that type of history was inculcated in us from first form. The teachers at the time, they went outside of the curriculum. And I think it was just because of the history of the college itself that you couldn't get away from it. And one of the things that I have been a proponent for, and Anarion and Priyanna and others have joined with ourPARTT, is to call for comprehensive review of the education curriculum, and with a return in some cases to things like civics, which my grandparents learned when they were in college, and also an entire course dedicated perhaps to patriotism and involvement in public policy and these types of activities that people don't really get a feeling for, because we sometimes ask, why is there this dearth of patriotism in the country? And it takes many hands to clap or shake in this scenario, because yes, you can say that the citizens should have a duty, in an inherent duty, but you have to start it at that young age when we are forming our minds and when we are starting to think about ourselves as people in this society and what does it mean to have these rights that our ancestors fought for. So there is a challenge there already. Then you have, as Priyanna said, layers of years of disengagement due to irresponsible political leadership. You also have other symptoms in the ecosystem taking place. So many young people are actually in survival mode. They're underemployed or unemployed. That's one of the reasons why, of course, some of them are attracted to the illegal sector. And I was making the point on another media house's program that no political leader, at least in my recollection, for the last 30 years, has truly crafted an inspirational, aspirational vision for the country. We had to wait until some of them passed away to start unpacking and putting together what their vision might have been. But you need all of these layers to work if you're really going to get the type of engagement that is required. So it's going to take a lot of work. And that's why we are so grateful to have this platform this afternoon to continue that kind of discussion. But we all have to do our part, no pun intended. The elders like yourselves, they have to not be fatigued. You have to still remain interested in sharing your knowledge. And those of us in the middle generation, we have to digest that from you and then translate it down further, because the school system is not doing it yet.
You know, when we look at, and this is my statement to you and to all the young people who are listening and viewing, is that when you have a general election and 54% of the population
Yes, they
vote, 46% of the eligible electorate stay away from the polls, you have a serious issue. Traditionally, we have been talking about the 35% stay away, meaning that the vote turnout would be around 60, 65. It must have got up to close to 70 or over 70 in 1986. The figures are not in my head immediately. But when you get down to 54. When, for instance, in this particular instance, when the PNM lost 150,000 votes from 2015 to the present, that's a serious matter. And I've been interviewing some of them, and I said, didn't you realize that it moved down from 150 to 100, meaning 50,000 stepped away in 2010, and now it's 150,000. There must be some reality there, check. So that if the democracy is not working, back in 1970, in the view of all of those people who got involved in 1970, is that the pre-colonial promises did not materialize. The social, the economic situation, the models were in place. And therefore, a whole generation of PNM people, of DLP people, of PDP people came out and said, look, we're going the wrong way. Something is happening. And I have a theory really, is that from 1970, if you look at the figures, the EBC figures every year, you will see a decline in them. There was a little bunch, as I said, in 1986. But then again, people have just got disenchanted.
Yeah.
So that it's important that I'm talking to some young people. I'm way past being anything concerned with youth. But I understand that people, if there is not a generation which is going to get in line and take over from the generation that is going and gone, then we're in really trouble, in really big trouble, because the next step would be some non-social intervention in all of this. Mr. Mason, what do you think?
Well, is it honestly that young people don't want to get involved in politics and doing this because those who came before us has shown such dishonesty and opaqueness in doing what it is they do? We know for a fact that there is corruption at the highest level. We know that crime is a business. And to be very honest with you, Tony, no young boy on the side of the road could go and get a gun or get a hands on cocaine or things like that. And it comes from somebody else. Where is it coming from? And young, intelligent people see this. And if this is what it is being set as an example for us. And now that we know better, seeing that we've matured and we went to school and these different things, we don't want to get involved in it. We don't want to be a part of it. Because honestly, they don't seem to be any way that persons can change it. And it's continuing no matter who's in power. You see it, you hear it, it's all over the newspapers.
But what about taking a different perspective and not seeing yourself beyond the boundary, as it were, as a sideliner, and saying that this is the society that I was born in, this is the culture that I've grown up in, and this is the society, I hope, that I want to live my life out and have my children and grandchildren and live in, and therefore attempt to intervene in the
So,
situation.
for example, we did 6 constitutional consultations when the whole reform was taking place last year. We hit Tobago, southeast, southwest, northeast, northwest, and central, meeting with hundreds of youths in each area, so thousands of people. And out of those recommendations, the only thing we saw was a change in the coat of arms. We made recommendations for announcement of ministers and ministries before elections. We made recommendations of set election dates. We made a lot of different recommendations came from young, intelligent people who have a passion to change the country. And then you come forward, and the only thing you see out of thousands of suggestions is a change in the coat of arms. The next thing young people is looking to do, they're not listening to me, they're not taking me on as best. I board a flight and I go somewhere.
Yeah, but what I'm preaching, and any one of you can take it up, is that this generation has to take over. That's the reality.
No, Tony,
If you
you are
wait,
right.
if you
you're right.
wait, for instance, if you wait on the generation, my generation, in 1970, we attempted something. And you know what happened? The oil bread started running in the mid 1970s. In fact, before the mid 1970s. And we, Harold Melville Blue Notes. You ever heard of that? It's before your generation. You know Harold Melville, the musician, and the group is called Blue Notes. And when the Blue Notes came in, the Blue Notes covered our mouths, and we succumbed. And I'm saying we attempted something. The generation,
Tony, you're right.
Attempted something.
If you use myself as a case study, as you said in the introduction, for all of my young adult into adult life, I have been in advocacy spaces. I've been an executive member of political parties. And there are some of us that got our, let's be real, we Mr. Dukaran once said that you have to learn to walk in the rain and not get wet, when he referred to the challenges that Anarion so aptly referenced, right? And people used to laugh at him and say, what kind of conceptual madness is this you're talking about? And I used to say to them, well, it's easy, it's called an umbrella. And what I meant by that is young people were getting involved and still are. If you look at, to be honest, when you look at the parties, many of the candidates actually are younger than previous years. Whether that translated, and our data shows that the younger voters, when you look at the trend analysis of the last 5 election cycles, and you extrapolate for the number of persons who would have turned 18 each cycle, the data says that those people are not participating, because when you look at the polling districts, almost vote for vote, the UNC and the PNM were more or less decreasing but maintaining certain strongholds, and the number of no votes, as you said earlier, that is an increasing tangent. But just to go back to my point, what I was saying is that there are some young people who got involved in politics and are getting involved in politics. My case study, I will tell you that, first of all, engineering that umbrella and holding it steady for all those years was very difficult. There were older people in the politics who tried to encourage me to release my stranglehold on ethical behavior. They would say things such as, well, that's just how politics is. And you have to have situational ethics when it comes to politics. And I know personally that I was locked out of rooms. I was undermined in the politics because I refused to release that umbrella. I did not want to get wet in the politics. Now, what some people don't have the resilience that I have. Other people, and you can't blame them, they start focusing on their career I have had to give up opportunities in the private sector because, believe it or not, even though the Constitution says that you have a right to political attachment, there are private sector companies that have policies that actually say you can't get involved in politics openly in the country. And again, I have made a call already 2 days after the election or a day after the election. I made a call for this incoming administration to look at laws that protect people's right to get involved in politics. I made a call that they must intentionally go out and put a call out for young people to submit their CVs so that on every state board, there must be at least 2 persons from this millennial and younger generation. They can't speak about it and not activate it. And it's not to say that it's impossible, because again, I'm a living case study that you can weather the storm. However, there are people who are gatekeepers and they hold the resources, as Priyanna was saying, and they hold the doors to accessing the change levels. And many young people are interested. But if groups like ourPARTT doesn't come into existence and we don't create space, as Priyanna was saying, use our privileges to help the other young people, they don't get in genuinely. They are used as props and public relations material. But all is not lost. We are seeing people using social media and other platforms to have a voice, and we all have to just support that and continue to make it a reality. So I am not jaded, but it is difficult. And unfortunately, we did not have that momentum building with what happened in the 70s and the Black Power movement, etc. There was a dip, there was an undermining of the current. And therefore, many times you're starting almost from ground zero. So I don't want to sound like I'm just saying all of the negatives, but because we understand the playing field, we have developed approaches to navigate that minefield and to get young people involved.
Just to tell our listeners that we are talking with a group of young people who come from, I suppose, various organizations, various backgrounds, and so on, but are involved in consciousness building. If you want to call that young people activity or whatever label you want to attach to it. So we are talking with them just after the general election, in which we saw, according to the EBC figures, that a mere 54% of the population, the eligible population, voting population, came out and put their vote. In one instance, and I'm highlighting this instance because it is so rare, so powerful, in the instance of the PNM, in 2015, they got nearly 400,000 votes. This time they got 150,000 votes fewer than they did then. The UNC was able to build something like 40 to 45,000 votes on their last showing at the 2020 election. So that if they did not lose, and there are all kinds of reasons for that, the bulk of their voting going back after election, they certainly got 45,000 votes. It's a substantial figure over a period of time. So we're talking about young people and their political involvement. What I have to say to you, which is something that is very apparent and should be apparent to you, is that young people stepping into the breach or attempting to step into the breach, it's not an easy job. It is a difficult. Our ancestors, when they followed Butler and Rienzi, that was not an easy job to follow. In the 1950s, when groups of people followed Eric Williams and Badisagan Maraj, that was not an easy thing for them to do. So that there are difficulties in any time and anything that you attempt to step out into the world to come. What of somebody said earlier, the politics, the nature of the politics, I think it was Priyanna, is not encouraging. Some young people don't want to step into that. You know, Hazel Brown used to talk about when she involved herself in politics, Priyanna. And you know, we learn from these people the objective or the goal, the job of the women were to cook food, sleep with some man who they wanted her to sleep with, etc., etc. And of course, Hazel would have none of that foolishness because of the kind of person that she was. It requires some, you know, stepping out of line and getting involved and sometimes some of my colleagues at my age, at our age, think about young women as being bullies and fast and out of their place and so on. Par for the course, Priyanna.
I want to say that all of those negative words that have been used to discourage and continue to oppress women, I am not unfamiliar with those terms, as I myself am a woman, a young woman in a very male-dominated space in the energy and oil and gas sector. And I have never been one to shy away from ruffling feathers. And I think I wanted to speak a little bit more. So the conversation had me thinking about this apathy that young people have. And it made me realize that while the external reasons may be justifying some of this apathy, I think internally there is a sense of potentially releasing accountability. That laziness, I want to say laziness, I could coin it into a different term, but in young people saying, well, all these things happened, these negative things happen, I've seen it happen, and somebody else in the young generation has to make a change. When we think somebody else, who is the somebody else who's going to do it? Who is the somebody else who's going to say, well, I've seen this happen, I felt like this was wrong, and I feel like there needs to be a change. We like to point fingers outward, and when we keep using the somebody or they or them or people, we remove ourselves from that equation of actually making a change. And that removal of accountability, I think, happens a lot in our generation. And I think that stems from, while social media can be used as a positive, there are downsides to social media. I mean, instant gratification has become a thing on social media. If you are not looking at a video, and then I think in the first 2 seconds or 3 seconds, if you don't capture attention, you lose the interest of young persons using social media. And I think that may potentially reflect any sort of deeply embedded issues and changes that need to be made by young people. If it is not immediately gratifying, it is left to the other, to the they, the them, the other people. And I think that young people feel as if getting involved is this just very general, unclear term. And there's so many ways for, I think, young people. The more I did the research, the more I myself stepped out of this apathy, is where I realized that, how do you get involved? Well, firstly, anything to do with politics and political engagement it really stems from a place of, what I see it as humanitarianism, the ability to give back, the ability to give of self to others. That is, I think, in my mind, ultimately what political engagement and politics is about, right? And in a democratic society, that's what it means. Giving of yourself to those who are less privileged, or to those who give you that responsibility to give of yourself. And so getting involved in NGOs and NPOs, getting involved in whether you like helping animals, whether you want to help young persons, whether you want to help people who are disabled, there are groups that you can join. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's not very far out. You could look up the list of NGOs that we have in Trinidad and Tobago, see which one aligns with you, and you get involved there. That's how you can get involved. In another sphere, in the professional sphere, you can get involved by moving towards a space where you ruffle feathers in order to reach onto the boards of organizations. Now, that's a more challenging a more challenging topic. I could say that from the energy sector, because almost every board of directors or board of any organization that I've ever seen growing up as a young person, a young woman in the energy sector, it is mostly older men. So I look around and I see absolutely no diversity in a lot of these boards. Recently, there has been some implementation of diversity and inclusion practices for even nominating board members, but that is in the last year or two. So if young people don't see themselves in spaces that decisions are being made, whether it's public or private sector boards, then where is the, even if it's a little bit of encouragement to just do a little bit more, be a little bit more present, find yourself in the space where they're making decisions, because where they're making decisions is what is going to affect me in 2 years, in 3 years, not 10 or 15 or 20 years far down the line, in the immediate future. And so it is the responsibility, to wrap it all up, it's the responsibility of the person, of the individual, and also of public and private sector organizations, leaders in those organizations, to encourage the voices of young people, whether it is in smaller spaces but there can be encouragement in so many different ways. And I think it's multiple persons' individual responsibility to get that, to shed that apathy and reach to a place where there is more involvement.
Just to piggyback off of what Priyanna is saying, you don't even need to wait till you reach that mature age, because from young in schools, there's RBC Young Leaders, there's Youth Parliament, there's Model UN, all of which I've been part of, that led me into the direction that I am going towards national development. Whether it be with party politics, or as Rudolph likes to put it, Vox Populi politics, business of the people, it's what I'm involved in. And young people, if you get involved from Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, go forward. So young people, they need to make a decision, but some of these things are not highlighted enough for persons to know. So educational campaigns and awareness around opportunities like this needs to be highlighted. Trinidad is part of the UN and part of the Commonwealth, and they both have different things that work in that realm. There's also national youth parliament and regional youth parliament, where you get training from parliamentarians to know how to operate and how to go about passing laws, doing legislations, debating, and things like that. And I was lucky enough that in my secondary school, I was part of those things. So I consider myself privileged. And through that, I am part of the alumni for youth parliamentarians, and we do mentorship for young people. So we want to continue things like that and build awareness. So you don't need to wait till you reach 18 to join an NGO or fight it in the workspace. You can join in even before you write CXE.
Yeah. Right. One of the things that I'm concerned about amongst all peoples, all age groups, better way to put it, is a kind of fragmentation that I myself, I grew up in and around Port of Spain, downtown Port of Spain, etc., etc. And the kind of fragmentation that I see exhibited in various places today, I didn't see in that period. We played sport, we engaged in each other, we visited, we lived in each other's home. There's a joke I tell, but it's a serious joke. And there were 4 of us growing up, 2 fellas like myself, Douglas, one a kind of halfway white boy, and the other one a German offspring kind of thing. So one in the 1970, the so-called white boy, we didn't call him a white boy because we didn't think he was a white boy.
You didn't use the term honky, Tony? I haven't heard that term in a long time.
Yeah, and we're walking through Woodford Square in the heat of 1970. Of course, we part of it. And a voice came out, look, a white boy moving there. So we looking around for the white boy. Where's the white boy? And then we look at Jerry. Well, we broke down in laughter that you are white. I'm not saying that there weren't difficulties among ethnic groups. There is no fairy tale story about that. But I find the fragmentation, especially when it is exhibited amongst young people, I find that to be frightening. Because if you are at 18 and 19 and 20, and you're talking about discriminatory relations with other people, when you harden in that and you get into your 30s and 40s, what's the way out for you? I don't know if I am seeing that from the outside, but that is not so. You tell me.
Well, Tony, I know we're just close to the hour, but quickly I'll tell you that I used to use the term Douglas generation a lot for my peers because the way we loved, the way we interacted, the way we played, our friends, we didn't see any fragmentation. But your point is still valid because sometimes your worldview is certainly different from other people in society. And like you, as I've been observing more, I have unfortunately seen the same fragmentation that took place within certain segments of our grandparents and parents' generations, where people still use certain derogatory words or they had these stereotypes about each other. Some of that has actually filtered down into our generation and younger. And when you look at bullying in schools, for example, which is one of the topics we don't like to touch properly at all in this country, bullying is learned discrimination, it's learned behavior based on prejudice. And people don't only bully in terms of what might be reported in the newspaper, like that young boy Jaden who took his life recently, where they were talking about his sexuality. People talk about your ethnicity, your socioeconomic background, your hair, the size of your body. So you're very right that these fragmentations, these prejudices are alive and well. And we play with it. We pretend sometimes that we're this wonderful multicultural nation. But again, that is why some of us have to hold space and to set the right example. And we have to correct our peers. When we hear these things or see them behaving in a certain way, we have to be the ones to pull them up and say, hold up, selector, that doesn't go well here at all. We don't live in that type of fragmentation.
I have to add here, I have been in an interracial relationship for the last few years. And we're speaking about the generations before us and the generation now that perpetuates this level of discrimination. And I have dealt with family members who have completely isolated me because they cannot fathom the fact that I am dating outside of my race. Family members, I am the younger generation. 2 generations above me have decided to isolate me and tell me, well, I cannot accept because this is what I know. So it is not just now, it is learned behavior. It is perpetuated generation by generation until you or I, because we're not using they and them anymore, until you or I decide, sorry, not in that context with the thems, but I mean, we're not looking outside of self. We're not looking at everyone else who should be making the change, and we have to decide that we are going to make that change. I have had to decide to cut ties with certain family members, and so that is simply just an example of how sometimes you may not be able to change them, but you also don't need to perpetuate. You do not need to say this.
And that is at this point, that's a very difficult a pressure on an individual to live outside of your family. It must be, notwithstanding whatever feel that you may have, feel mean FWL, you feel for the situation. It is a difficult thing to part company in whatever kind of way with your family members because of some retained prejudices which will not go away. But I see another face on. Is that Andy?
Yes,
I
it
saw.
is.
Yeah. Andy, welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be
And
here.
your colleagues and I have really been listening to them. When you get old, you have to sit down and listen to young people, right? So I have been listening to them. I have 3 young children. They are not children. They are adults. I think one of them went to school with Rudy back then. And I listened
I
to
was his
them.
prefect.
Yes, I listened. I listened to them and I try to learn from them, but that's another story. So we kind of shifting it around, Andy, asking people about their own experiences and their views, really, on the whole business of politics, political parties getting involved in politics. We talked about the fact that it can be healthy for 50% of the population to say, I will not choose one of the political parties. That, I think, I am sure, is also a statement on the political parties themselves who have been perpetuating division amongst the population for a long time. But let's hear your view, Andy. Anything and anywhere you want to start your intervention, as it were.
My view on the political parties, I mean, I feel like I do sympathize with that 50% who has been disillusioned by the choices that we have had. The coming from the sectors and the backgrounds I have in technology, advancing, gaming, animation, all these different type of things, I feel like the parties speak to an idea of Trinidad that may have existed some years ago, but is not necessarily the direction that the young people want Trinidad to go. And when they do speak on the future of Trinidad, I think it comes from a place of not fully understanding how the world is evolving, where things are going, and the direction that really the youth of the country want to push the country. I'm coming from an avenue of I'm into video games. My company, we develop video games, all these different interactive media, interactive technology. And we talk about getting computers in students, things like getting computers in students' hands, getting equipment for them, but we never really discuss the young people who are designing tools and software that work with these technologies and these equipment. How do we get that built here at home in Trinidad and Tobago? And I feel like neither of the parties really address that. It's more of a let's bring in some hardware and let's go out and find somebody to support us software-wise as well. It's not really about building a homegrown ecosystem that we all can, build on and thrive with.
I think it's a similar sentiment from the sector that I am in with the renewable energies. I think it feels like, we go back to using this word disconnect, right? It feels like there's a disconnect between what is being said and what the reality of the rest of the world is. The advancements, the space that the rest of the world is in technology, and technologies like animation, video games, renewable energy technologies. And these are some things that have been in certain economies and states and countries for decades now. And so how far behind are we to not even be to a much deeper level exploring these topics?
Yeah.
What I'd like to tell Andy is that I am attempting to push you people away from being, stuck in a corner, dependent on what is happening, but rather going out and chart your own path. Because if you attempt to follow my generation, that's clean as that will mean more of me in the next generation, and you don't want that to happen, do you?
Yeah.
I
think
don't necessarily think that that's a bad thing. We are also learning from you here. And I always speak to giving Jack the jacket, giving respect where respect is due, and learning from those who have come before us. From both the mistakes that they made and the lessons that they can teach us. So while we sit here and we listen to what the younger people can say, it is imperative that all other generations are involved just as much, because we spoke about community before. Community, the ability to just, you mentioned your story about going over by friends and spending more time together. The involvement of community and all ages, all socioeconomic backgrounds is what I think here will make the difference.
And to touch on the point of going out and charting your own course, I mean, we've been doing that for the past, I'd say, 7-8 years now, and we've gotten a lot of support out of TNT. But there is something about you want to build something at home for the next generation at home to have. I had to struggle to get where I am now, and I've been able to make it a lot easier for younger graduates to get into this field, and I want to continue to make it easier for younger graduates to get in this field. If we consistently focus all our attention, I'm not saying we don't have to focus some, but we focus all our attention on building ourselves externally, we're not really bringing anything back home to continue, to build it out for the future. We're just giving it to foreign powers, whether that be Europe, US, anywhere in the world. We're building for them, but we're not building for ourselves. And at some point, we really have to look inwards and decide we need to build here at home systems, tools that the next generation can latch on to, and when they're ready to do something amazing, they don't have a hard time as we had to do what we're trying to do.
And Tony, that is the point, just to tack on quickly to Andy's last intervention there. We said that earlier, that is what some of us are doing. We're acting as that bridging factor to try and break some of these cycles. Because what Andy's really talking about, and you mentioned it earlier, is that plantation economy perspective or mindset has permeated down into the generations. And even in today's world, when you look at the energy sector, for example, we are supposed to be the nation that is the oldest producer of oil. Many people, Priyanna, you would bear me out. You've read reports where people claim that, and yet the way that we engage with the energy sector is we have never been.
We've been sticking to our oil and gas identity.
Yes. And
which is reflective of our identity, where the old remains, the new we will put barriers up to, keep the new out. We continue in our oil and gas identity where, I mean, I don't know if we're going to go into all of this, but the implementation of... Mm-hmm.
It is tried and proven at this point in time because 80% of our export is through oil and gas, which is the largest factor to the GDP. But as you are rightfully saying, oil and gas isn't dead, but we are in a transition period.
Yes, we are.
Just to indicate to our listeners, our viewers, so that we have opened the forum this afternoon to a group of young people who are talking about, and I'm trying my best, not that they need any urging in that direction, because they have already stepped out of their various creases, and are attempting to do something that is different. And frankly, I feel that the reality is, if the society doesn't move in a different direction, we are going to be in serious trouble. I hear political parties who are not yet in office, and they're still talking, sorry to the energy lady, but they're still talking about oil and gas. And I am not knocking oil and gas. We have to use the revenue from oil and gas to develop other sectors. But
absolutely,
yeah, that's it.
1 day, 2 days a week in office, and they're still talking about energy without any conception that there is a whole room outside there of different areas of economic activity which we need to get involved in. But don't let me start preaching too much. This is not my afternoon to preach.
No, but
I leave
No,
the
but
preaching to
you're
Priyanna.
going down the right road, Tony, because one of the biggest promises that the current government has indicated is the reopening of Petrotrin. And that in itself is a concern because the capacity of Petrotrin is about 168,000 barrels per day. And when they closed in 2018, they were using about 60 to 70%, which was just over 100,000. Now, Trinidad and Tobago oil production only caters for about 40 to 50. So we need to bring in oil from other places. I heard it on Saturday when she announced her cabinet. She said she was sending her Minister of Energy and Energy Industries to
The Prime
Guyana.
Minister, the Honorable Prime Minister.
The Honorable Prime Minister. I will forever know her as Auntie Cams. And that is through personal affiliations. But besides that, she's sending him to Guyana. And in that regards, Guyana's current production is 600 something thousand barrels per day. Whilst Petrotrin could only handle 100 and something, 160,000, right? So we could take a percentage of Guyana's oil and refine it and run Petrotrin at its maximum capacity. However, the geopolitical space right now indicates that all the production from Guyana goes to the States refine it and send it back to Guyana. Guyana is in preparation of doing their own refinery, but their own refinery can handle 30 to 50,000. So out of 600,000, Trinidad should be able to get a slice of that pie. I am not knocking the fact that Petrotrin reopening is a good thing, but there's a lot of different things that needs to be done because on a good day, our capacity was only 60 to 70%, not 100% efficient. And we need to get that back up. In the same breath, I would say that that transition from to bring back in Petrotrin, we have some work that started recently in the country. I think that was under BP and Shell with some new fields that they were taking into consideration. And that being said, we should be able to start to produce about 60,000 barrels from the BP field. And we should be able to, handle that. With that being said, we could start to diversify the economy if it is we spend efficiently and we allocate implementations
You
that is
know,
necessary.
Tony Anarion is being so kind because if I have nothing better to do with my life, but to Priyanna's point, I like to learn from older people. And I have read every single budget statement since 1970. In the 1975 budget statement, which was presented by George Chambers as Minister of Finance, do you know that he used the word diversification and spoke about the risk, the inherent risk in our oil and gas sector? Because at that time, when all of us other than you were not alive, the world was reeling from economic pressures that carried the prices of commodities all the way down. And at that point, we were still exporting sugar and cocoa. And he spoke about the need to invest in new sectors and to ensure that even the petroleum sector was diversified. Priyanna is living proof, Andy's living proof that renewables, which in the 80s had become a talking point. In Andy's sector, animation, technology, the creative space, we say we are the home of the greatest show in the world. These issues, Tony, it really, they irritate me to a point because our elders have spoken about diversification. But to Anarion's earlier point, the monies that we generated from oil and gas, we invested most of it into transfers and subsidies and created a social welfare state. And now our generation We are inheriting the highest levels of debt to GDP. We are inheriting the crime situation. We are inheriting underemployment. Andy has had to fight. I could tell you, he may not say this. He has had to crawl his way to build that company when the government should have been pouring money into that sector. Priyanna has been driving different initiatives and ideas to solarize our energy space, our electricity space. And it's all landing on deaf ears. So maybe we do really need to raise our voices. But 50 years ago, we were talking about these issues.
Yeah.
And
Of course, what we did quite a lot of, and we still have them as trophies. We built all these malls. 95% of their produce or what they sell has come from abroad, and with little input in the local sector, notwithstanding. And you talk about this. The thing of diversification going back sometime, it goes back to Arthur Lewis in the 1930s.
True.
It's a long, long time that we've been talking about this, and I don't want to be critical of the government just yet. It's my job to be critical of them in the way I perceive it to be. But I'm waiting to hear some statements about, developing other sectors than the energy sector. And they need a little bit of time. So I'm going to be generous with time, about 2 weeks is the extent of generous.
That's a short honeymoon, boy.
Yeah, very short.
But Tony, if you look at it from Trinidad, if you go back, one of the first oil wells ever drilled was from Trinidad and Tobago. And look at Dubai and Saudi Arabia. It's proper management of funds have them in that place, because Dubai and Saudi Arabia is a tourist destination from oil and gas money. Trinidad and Tobago is number 5 on the crime watch list. We keep cutting Priyanna across. Can we allow her a chance?
We don't want to be
no problem at all. I mean,
sexist at all.
I don't think so at all. I feel like we all just feel very passionately about this topic particularly, and I wanted to go back to our oil and gas identity, because what we were speaking about before we mentioned the refinery was our oil and gas identity, and now we're speaking about the slow implementation of any sort of diversity in our economy. And there are a lot of things, systemic or systematic things that are, or policies that are in place that, if given the right attention or amount of attention, we can quickly change the course of our trajectory. We can quickly change our trajectory to solar and renewable energy. We can quickly change our trajectory. I mean, we're speaking about the refinery, but now, while there are pros and cons of the refinery, I have to say, focusing on reviving the refinery is a clear example of remaining in this oil and gas, oil-based petrochemical sector. Now, if managed well, and that is the big if managed well, and if the proceeds, if the money that we make from the oil and gas, the petrochemical, the new refinery is put into good use, we can, to a large extent, invest in diversification of the economy. We can use those same US dollars and purchase vast amounts of renewable energy technologies, or maybe even develop manufacturing plants right here in Trinidad to start to create our own renewable energy technologies. And so, with the right management and the right streamlining of the profits of the refinery, I think that we could be in a much better space. And that would impact everything from our US allocations for private sector to be able to access US, to be able to purchase renewable energy components, to be able to bring it here and implement it more. And also, I think, speaking about the private sector should have a much larger involvement in energy management, in energy distribution, and energy generation in our country. There are pros to having a government-owned and run generation and distribution, or partly generation and distribution for energy. However, including the private sector, I think can be very beneficial.
Yeah, but
I think
Priyanna, you have to develop a private sector that needs to be pushed away from buying and selling. One economist makes the point all the time, if you make life easy for the buyers and sellers, then they will do nothing else but buy and sell, buy from abroad and sell them here, soak up the foreign exchange that the energy sector earns. And I am sure that governments, plural, over a period of time, they have made it too easy for the private sector to get by. And when the shouts come for additional foreign exchange, their voices are the loudest ones, and they make no contribution whatsoever to the earning of the foreign exchange.
And I think that's, yes.
Yeah, some of that, we're talking about all manufacturing and all these things, but there's also, we're forgetting that in the last decade, a huge suck of our foreign exchange has been services. We gave students tablets during COVID, laptops before that, right? We handed those out. That's hardware. We may not be able to manufacture hardware, but no one talks about how much we spend licensing Windows for every student that got one. How much we spend licensing Microsoft Word. So that's Word and Windows you're spending licensing on. How much money then you spend on a Canvas platform for the students to use. And we're importing that. And I can tell you, there are people in this country that can build that to international standards. It doesn't take much to make a word processor in this day and age, that we don't have to keep buying every little service that we want to run on our phones, foreign, bringing it here and paying them $7 a month multiplied by 1.4 million people every single month leaving the country because we want Netflix, we want Microsoft Word, we want Google this, we want all these big tech companies that are secretly and silently, without us even realizing, putting a strain on our economy. And we see countries like India, we see places in Africa, we see places in Asia that have developed their own homegrown solutions, and what a difference that makes for their people's confidence in using these technological tools when the phone call is right here on island when a problem comes around, and how little of a reliance they have to have on foreign companies. If those internet lines going into Trinidad, that's another thing, go down tomorrow morning, I would say maybe 60% of our infrastructure goes down with that, because we're not doing that much on island, and we can do more on island. And then what we're doing on island, we can share with the rest of the region, bringing back foreign exchange. So we cut out the need for bringing in from the US and Europe, and we're able to sell it to our partners in the region, right? Why is it
substitution?
Why can't we build an educational platform, license that to every CARICOM member that's you doing CXC, and it's a win-win for everyone, right? It's really tailored to what we need to teach our people in the region. It gives the companies and the developers that are building these platforms access to revenue to continue to grow and expand these sectors. And it takes the strain off of the government to have to constantly go out and seek these international partners to come back here and give us a solution that may not be what we exactly need to grow in the region.
Okay, so we are talking with 4 young people this afternoon. We were driven to this, as it were, by looking at the non-participation, and we're making guesses because the figures are not specific, but we are certain that in the 46% of the eligible electorate that did not vote, did not participate in this election, we are certain that you will have large numbers of young people inside here. So we decided to invite some young people to tell us about what not only what they think about the present generation, but what are their ideas? Do they have things which are different from what exists? The 2 major political parties I have written them off a long, long time ago because they simply have not been able to service the need. The NAR came into office in '86, and the expectations rose to the heavens. And within 2 or 3 years, fragmentation took place. And by the end of the period, I think they were able to move from 33 seats to 2 seats in Tobago. And that was the fragmentation went on. There were parties that were voted into office, and before they could spend months, they had started fragmenting and a fresh election started. That happened 2 or 3 times. So the easy conclusion to come to, one which I have come to for some time, is that the 2 major political parties are simply unable. They have served their period of time. They brought political independence to the country. And there was some movement in the 1980s when the 1970s really, when according to Dr. Williams, if money was a problem before, it is not a problem now, according to him. Of course, a lot of it was used for the wrong purposes, but you have to be fair to him in particular, that he started Point Lisas, which was an attempt to move away from the sugarcane fields, and so on and so on. So I am saying that you young people, you're on stage now, and it is your time to do something that is different, because the generations which come after you are going to be asking you that question. I could say I marched in 1970. We didn't go right through with it, but we made an impact somewhere. So Charles, if you're listening, I think we could take a little bit of good music, young people music, to break the tedium of talk. So if you are there, give us some music that we could all shake ourselves a little bit. Even old people like me could shake up a little bit, right? Go.
No problem. That's the easy part of it. Let's go.
Hear the cries in the streets at night. So many dreams born out like light. Youths them caught in a system cold, chasing shadows that take their soul. But the rhythm of hope is strong. Feel the beat, guide us along. Plant the seed of change in the ground and reap the fruits of love from this song. I'm sure we can rise from the shadows as we shine. Through the pain and the sorrows, leave the darkness behind. For the youths and the future, let the healing begin. In the rhythm of we island, let love pull us in. So come from the dusk till dawn, as we rise up every morn. We'll fly through the skies like plane. All people will rise again. Hand in hand is how we'll start. Everyone can play their part. Man, woman and child come in. Let the cleansing begin. Come on. Cleanse them. For the common man, times real hard. Crime and murder's driving we mad. And the youths them can't find no work, cause the system take them for joke. Let the positive fight control. We must not lose sight of our goal. In spite the stress and the strain, let us build our country again. I'm sure we can rise from the shadows as we shine. Through the pain and the sorrow, leave the darkness behind. For the youths and the future, let the healing begin. In the rhythm of the island, let love pull us in. So come from the dusk till dawn, as we rise up every morn. We'll fly through the skies like plane. All people will rise again. Hand in hand is how we'll start. Everyone can play their part. Man, woman and child come in. Let the cleansing begin. Politicians drive the nice car, while the poor man bite the finger. All
money blow away like dust. The people don't know who to trust. But every crisis we will master and rise to triumph from disaster. We will cast the evil away. We make the solemn pledge here today. I'm sure we can rise from the shadows as we shine. Through the pain and the sorrows, leave the darkness behind. For the youths and the future, let the healing begin. In the rhythm of the island, let love pull us in. So come from the dust till dawn, as we rise up every morn. We'll fly through the skies like plane. All people will rise again. Hand in hand is how we'll start. Everyone can play the part. Man, woman and child come in. Let the cleansing begin. Clean the heart. From the ghetto I born and grow. I learned to make joy from sorrow. Though my story was hardship and pain, I see the blessings falling like rain. And every time the setbacks would come, I keep the faith and weather the storm. With every step and toil I strive, just to keep my dreams alive. I'm sure we can rise from the shadows as we shine. Through the pain and the sorrows, leave the darkness behind. For the youths and the future, let the healing begin. In the rhythm of the island, let love pull us in. So come from the dust till dawn.
All right, a little bit of young brother there for you.
Yes, Charlo, and
yes.
as I indicated a few weeks ago, I want to get him on the program to talk about the kind of influence that he can have. It's, I think, nationally known that he's from the Sealots community, and there's a lot of difficulty in the area. You know, an amazing thing that it's situated a few hundred yards from the central bank in Port of Spain. People living in the most horrible conditions that you can perceive of. So I really want to get him at, I think he was going away. His manager told me that he was going to perform someplace in the Caribbean, I think. But I want to get him at some point in time to talk about the song, talk about how we can make the song come alive in his own community. But that's for another program. We're attempting to do a similar kind of thing with another group of young people. I don't know if there are any calypsonians and chutney singers amongst them. Though if they could damble, you know, but that's another story. They are professionals in different areas of operations outside of the culture industry. But I get the sense from Andy that he's very much into the creative industries, which is something, incidentally, that we have spurned as if it is just jump up on Skylark and so on. Andy?
Yes, I am here.
Go ahead.
So I am in the creative industries. Specifically, my niche is development of video games. It is one of the largest industries in the world. I think last year, if we're talking just raw numbers, it did about $200 billion worldwide. And just about 45% of that was just games for your Android phone, games for your iPhone. And I am very passionate about finding a way to bring this sector in mass to Trinidad and Tobago. And there's the demand for it on the consumer side, but there's also a huge demand for it on the young persons that want to create these experiences that they've spent their entire life consuming, right? There's a mental shift in we don't always have to be the consumers of somebody else's art and creativity. We can build that for ourselves here in Trinidad and Tobago. When I first graduated the University of Trinidad and Tobago, I don't know if Rudy's still here, but he would have met me as a student, still trying to figure this out. And
Yes.
I left with me and one classmate, and we said we were going to give this thing a try. We're going to figure out how to make video games in TNT. How are we going to create something and put it out into the market. And it started with just 2 of us, and we've scaled to, I believe, we're over 30 people right now creating games, but we still don't have that support to really push or make that huge push into the local market that we want. So we spend most of our time working with studios abroad, helping them finish their products, helping them create their games. And like I said earlier, that's fun and that's great. And we've learned so much from that outsourcing, that collaboration experience with these studios in North America. But we're at a point right now where we realize we can't keep building other people's products, other people's passions, other people's dreams. We need to find a way to bring that expertise that we've picked up over the last few years, build something for the Trinidad/Caribbean market, and release it to the world, right? We think that bringing video games to Trinidad will have a huge impact in our ability to diversify the economy, and not just through large studios, right? A single person, like if we look at an example, I feel like most people have played Flappy Bird. That person was able to generate millions in revenue from their simple little mobile game. And if we can use video games, a medium that a lot of young people are, enamored with, they're hooked on it, and show them that you can create these things and put it out in the world. You can have a stake in generating that creativity, that content, and that revenue, which our country needs at this stage in its life. If we can do it and show everyone that it can be done here, it can make a huge shift locally in the business sector, locally in the creative sector, and as well locally in the schools. Because what people don't realize is video games itself is a marrying of so many different skill sets. We have programmers, we have graphic designers, we have animators, we have sound engineers, and they're all coming together to create this unique.
And even lawyers. And
even lawyers.
Other professions.
One of my friends was telling me,
if one lawyer says so,
an interior designer, like you wouldn't think about it, but if I'm making a video game and there's a living room and I have no design taste, I need somebody to come on board and do that. And it's an industry that's able to employ so many different skills, so many disciplines, and then they don't have to stay in that industry. If we nurture programmers in the video game industry, and then some of them leave and some of them build what I was talking about, our own local word processor, some of them build our own local payment platform, some of them build interactive signs for when we go into the malls to help people navigate, right? That's one sector.
So, Andy, are you saying that are you saying that it's not only fun and games, developing the various capacities, meaning that the skills can be put to something? I don't want to sound like if I'm bashing it, but something outside of fun and games, and I'm not knocking fun and games at all.
Yeah. So we have a sector in gaming called serious games, and it's not about creating video games for somebody to have fun with. It's about creating games that can train somebody, creating games that can teach somebody, right? We have this huge oil and gas sector in Trinidad. We will import a piece of software to train them how to use the plants when we can build that here locally. And if they're willing to work with the studios and the technologists in our country through gaming, through other avenues, through other platforms, it doesn't just have to be fun and games. It can teach someone a valuable skill.
Let me ask
you,
sign me up as an
Priya, you might respond to this. Let me ask the engineers in the hard industry, meaning the oil and gas sector. Mm-hmm. Is there room in that sector for local initiative, local development of whatever is required, software packages, whatever? You know the industry. I don't know the industry in that kind of way.
Well, I was now going to respond to Andy and say, I mean, as part of the renewable energy sector, there is a lot of software design associated with renewable energy. If a customer, whether it's a commercial, residential, large organization, public sector, comes to me and they say, I want a solar system to do this, what do I have to go to? I have to go to a software that we typically use, a solar generation software, input some data, input the relevant information about this customer's location, what they want, what type of system they want, what kind of products I want to use, and it will then output for me a full or multiple options for what said customer wants, right? And that sounds to me like an avenue for software development that can happen right here locally. I mean, there's local inputs, but it is obviously a foreign-owned piece of software, and there's multiple softwares. One more well-known than others called PVSys. But I see that there could be an opportunity here from what you were saying for local persons, and a lot of what you were speaking about was really aside from independence, it is entrepreneurship. It is a business mind that you're trying to create here. And that can be applied across the board, not just with software development, but in every sense of the word. The independence to be able to say, okay, I can create this, I can mimic this. It can be created, like you were saying, right here in Trinidad. I could benefit from it by selling it. I could ensure that Trinidadians here can benefit from it. I could potentially bring in foreign exchange to do so. And it had me thinking about solar systems. Now, in a very similar way, renewable energy systems can make a residential, a homeowner, independent in a very similar way. In places right here near to Trinidad, in Grenada and Barbados, there's something called a feed-in tariff. And Rudy and Anarion, we would have spoken about this briefly in our last interview. This feed-in tariff allows the homeowner the ability to just buy a ton of inexpensive, very cost-efficient panels, slap it on their home roof. Whatever they generate from this solar panel system, and they could use, however, if they generate a surplus of energy that they will not be using in their household every day, they can sell it to the grid. What does that mean? They can benefit from generating energy. Every single homeowner can become an independent source of energy generation. That can help our utility grid. That can help bring down the demand for conventional energy and empower the residential homeowner, the customer, the everyday person to be independent and be able to contribute then to our energy demand, energy supply, benefit themselves from it, because anything that they produce in surplus, they get paid by the utility to create this. So it's an ecosystem then, and by encouraging public and private involvement then.
And Priyanna, state the obvious for us. The natural gas that would be saved, rather than it being used for local electricity production, can be sold on the open market. And in the last 10 years, we lost out on a windfall opportunity because we were using a lot of it here rather than selling it. And that is money that could have gone into Andy's types of projects. It could have gone into Priyanna's types of projects. And I hasten to add back, just going back to the creative sector for a moment, some of the studies are showing that the inputs to Carnival, for example, actually cost the country more foreign exchange than Carnival earns, We have to ask the question, is Carnival a net earner? But if you are able, as Priyanna is saying, or Andy, to reimagine your economy, and you're generating revenues in different ways, and you're realigning how traditional oil and gas is utilized, all of those additional streams of revenue can go into more productive use. And we could digitalize Carnival. We claim to be the birthplace of it. Well, why are we not investing in R&D? Andy and why aren't we hiring his people to do virtual reality Carnival products? Why are we not using Carnival to push sustainability? all of the input, the raw materials that go into Carnival, why can't we develop some local substitutes right here? And again, train young people in the arts of mass. They can then go on and train others.
And some of the costumes are not too difficult to make, right?
No, but made in China is benefiting them and not us. So I hope the listeners and viewers are seeing out there that there's a lot of integration among these ideas. The way that we are speaking, it begs policymakers to look at the ecosystem, look at the economy, and ensure things are integrated. We shouldn't have silos happening because one person's output could be somebody else's input. So if Priyanna's technology can help solarize a mass camp, and in that mass camp, we are using some of the technology that has been homegrown right here. The technology runs on electricity, but we're not using natural gas to fuel that electricity. So these are the ways we have to start thinking.
An ecosystem of sustainability. Yeah.
Then some of the money.
Okay. Yes.
And then some of the money that you're saving from things like that can go into something that I am very passionate about, medical tourism, because a lot of people travel outside of Trinidad to seek medical attention. Those
including the prime ministers.
And ministers. Those who are privileged enough. And by doing that, I can piggyback off of Andy aspect where we can have a biomedical hub here, right here, where we have programmers, we have high-tech equipment, and technology is being used. It's simply enough the funding that we see from that oil and gas, from burning gas and selling it, could go into investments like that, and that expands our economic portfolio. It brings jobs, it brings opportunities, and it creates a new entire sector for young people to get involved in.
You talk about medical tourism or medical services for people abroad. I don't know if it's well known, but in the little island of Montserrat, 30, 40 years ago, I worked for Radio Antilles, which came out of Montserrat at that point in time. There was a small but growing services. Not all of the doctors and nurses and so on were Montserratian, but they brought in people and specialists, and they were developing an industry in tiny Montserrat with 12, 14,000 people at that point in time. There was also, at that point in time, a studio which a number of artists, including the Beatles, came to Montserrat.
Wow.
To record, but of course they had the bad luck of a hurricane and then a volcano, and that put
we don't have. We don't have those risks.
Put a bit to that. Yeah, so I like the expansion of ideas out of the ordinary, because the inventive mind is what is going to prevail in the circumstances. You go to the South Asian countries, Korea, South Korea, all of those, Singapore, and so on. They have moved. The story in South Korea is that they moved from a donkey cart society in the 1960s to be one of the most competitive producers of goods and services to around the world. So
I was making the same jokes very similar to that with Rudolph some time ago. We started off as a plantation economy, and the new renewable project that is taking place in Point Lisas is occurring where our old sugarcane factory is, to show a full circle.
Yeah. But Tony, I thought Anarion was actually going to make a reference to something I say all the time, that the steel pan is perhaps, to my mind, the best symbol of innovation in the entire world. Because imagine people like Winston Spree Simon and others saw a rusty, rotting piece of metal, an old drum in the mud, and something inside of them that was created by our natural curiosity, the coming together of all of our minds, our religions, our ethnicities. Something in their mind made them think, wait a minute, I could take this out of the mud and convert it into, as far as I'm concerned, the most beautiful instrument in the whole world. And when Mr. Charles was playing the Young Brothers song, it reminded me of Portrait of Trinidad by the Mighty Sniper. And in that calypso alone, there are at least 8 examples of how Trinidad and Tobago has taken the world by storm. And if we were able to inculcate that type of mindset, as my colleagues are saying, into young children, into young professionals, Tony, imagine what we could create right here, because there are companies around the world that actually use Trinidad and Tobago as a testing ground for their products and services because of our diversity. We have a natural diverse pot where other countries have to pay or to go and look for people who resemble us or come from our backgrounds. That is a power, but we suppress it. The cone of innovation in our education system, it harkens back to the colonial type of education where we still have prestige schools and they have schools who don't have equitable access to resources. People with great ideas, they leave school thinking that I don't need to, I shouldn't even bother to think about those things. I just need to get a cookie cutter job and a pension, and that's how I'm going to live my life. But I'm so inspired by my colleagues. There are many of us out there who we want to do innovative things. We want to break the mold. We want to push for these new ideas. But I always go back to the steel pan as our main symbol of how we can create something, but also at the same time, unfortunately, how we don't monetize it properly. We don't protect it properly. We don't love it properly.
One of the things that we have to learn about the steel band, and the history is always important, are the circumstances out of which they came. A few years ago, 10 years or so ago, I interviewed the great Neville Jules, and he talked about the circumstances that he was tuning pan. And I don't want to be irreligious, but these are his words. Right next door to him were some people who would empty their po, his description, his direction when he was attempting to craft the instrument. We need to understand something of that. But let me wind up as we wind up the program this evening. Let me try to move you out of, thinking to acting. In that, as we indicated at the start of the program, this program has come about because of the refusal of a significant portion of the population to be involved in choosing a government. And I am saying that really the future, not to repeat Williams, but to say that the future really rests with people like yourself. Give us a 1-minute closing comment, each one of you, as we wind up the program, as to what are the possibilities ahead for you to move into something that is proactive.
I could start. I think I was Rudy in the last program as well. We spoke about these calls to action, right? And
yes.
And while we're speaking about energy and energy sector and renewable energy and software and all these things, I think to go back to my earlier point as a conclusion is that if you think that there is something to change, nobody is going to come and change it for you unless you say something about it and do something about it. We are living in a world where AI is now a tool. Ask ChatGPT how to do it. I am certain it will give you 5 or 10 different ways that you can get what you want to get done, and find a way to continue to use your voice, your platform. I use my social media platforms. I use my voice. I speak on platforms like this to make the change. Get involved in some form of NGO, NPO, some form of humanitarian organization, whether it is from the school level, whether it is an official capacity, or whether it is as an organization. Get involved, say what you have to say.
Rudy, to your turn. 30 seconds.
quite quickly, you need to utilize technology in a more responsible manner, young people out there. It's something that you have at your disposal that our elders didn't have. And while entertaining yourselves is important, you can use that technology to educate and empower yourself and to learn new skills and to have a voice. So use technology better and imagine the vision of Trinidad and Tobago that you want, and keep that in your heart and join with other young people like us, and let's make it a reality.
Hey, your turn.
I would go with the idea of trust each other. We have a lot of young people with a lot of really great ideas, and rather than trusting the foreign companies or the foreign markets, trust each other. The idea may not be perfect at the start, but if we trust each other and stick with what's being developed in our own ecosystems amongst ourselves, something great will emerge. But we have to have that trust in each other to give each other the opportunity to bring something innovative and to bring something new to the market.
Mr. Mason, your turn.
I would say, in a world facing crisis after crisis, it is easy to forget the true wealth of a nation. The true wealth is born every day. It is our ideas, our voice, our hands, our hearts. It is us. We are the resource. Rise up, rebuild, and redefine.
And of course, join ourPARTT, Tony. Go to ourPARTT.org with 2 T's and get involved.
Yeah. Thank you very much for participating in the discussion this afternoon. And just to indicate to our listeners, our viewers, that tomorrow we're going to deal with the politicians of old. I'm calling them the politicians of old, in that I did an interview with Foster Cummings of the PNM, and he is trying to put him in some sting and nettle. You know, I don't know if you young people know about sting and nettle.
Oh yeah.
And sting and nettle in trouble. And the man I call the Grandmaster of PNM politics, Rudy to talk about the political organization. Last week we had Vasant Bharat, formerly of the UNC. I'm not sure he's politically aligned anymore, talking about that side of the politics. And so this week we're going to deal with the PNM. Thank you again. And Sir Charles, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everyone. Be safe.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much, Tony. Of course, this has been your afternoon drive time exchange.
The rhythm of we island, let love pull us in. So come from the dusk till dawn, as we rise up every morn. We'll fly through the skies like plane, all people will rise again. Hand in hand is how we'll start. Everyone can play their part. Man, woman and child come in, let the cleansing begin. Come on, cleanse them. For the common man, times real hard. Crime and murder's driving we mad. And the youths them can't find no work, cause the system take them for joke. Let the positive fight control. We must not lose sight of our